Hi guys, so in this video we'll be discussing the causes of a deficit, right? So the first cause is a rise in income levels. So let's say if the incomes of a certain population go up, for example, let's just take the example of Pakistan. So if incomes of people in Pakistan go up, then what's going to happen is our consumption will go up. Because obviously now what happens is we can buy more goods and services. So since we can now buy more goods and services, right, what happens is not only do we buy more domestic goods, but at the same time, because we are earning more now, we also start buying more imports. For example, let's say before we were buying coffee from Pakistan, right, we are using Pakistani coffee beans or coffee beans from some country which isn't really known for its coffee beans, right? And then as we grew richer, right, as our incomes grew as a population, what will happen is we'll start importing, let's say, Brazilian coffee beans or any sort of luxury product, because now we are earning more and so we import more as well. So as we import more, what happens is, since our imports are greater than our exports, which means more foreign currency is going out of our country as compared to coming into our country, right? And if more is going out, there is more debit as compared to more credit, which leads to a deficit in the balance of payments. Now at the same time, since incomes are increasing, there is one more effect. So when incomes are increasing, right, as I just said, we buy more domestic goods as well, right, over here. Since we are buying more domestic goods as well, what's going to happen is our domestic firms, may want to increase their output, and to increase their output, they may start importing capital goods from, let's say, some country which is specialized in the production of capital goods. Importing capital goods from Germany or wherever the country is. And so when our incomes increased, we started buying more domestic goods as well. And so the firms wanted to increase output to meet the demand. And so they started importing more capital goods, right? And so when you import, obviously, as we just discussed, as you import, and given that your imports are greater than your exports, you have more debit as compared to more credit. More money is going out as compared to money coming in, and so it will lead to a deficit again. Okay, let's move on to the second reason. Okay, so under this reason, what happens is, let's say if the price of a commodity which has an inelastic price elasticity of demand, that is, if the prices were to increase by a lot, the quantity demanded would only fall by a bit, right? And so, like, this is the whole scenario in this case. So what's going to happen is, let's say if something like oil, right, let's just take the example of oil. If the price of oil goes up, right, in the international market, since the demand for oil is relatively inelastic, what's going to happen is our import expenditure, right, price into quantity is also expenditure. So if the prices are going up by a lot, quantity is falling down by a bit, sorry. So in the end, what's going to happen is our import expenditure will increase. Right? So if our import expenditure is increasing, since obviously oil doesn't really have a lot of substitutes and it's an essential good, so because of this, what's going to happen is our import expenditure will increase. Again, imports greater than exports, more debit as compared to credit, and so a deficit in the end, balance of payment deficit. Now this is the third reason for balance of payment deficit, which is confidence in the economy. So let's say if the confidence in the economy falls due to some reason, for example, political unrest, we can take the attack on Capitol Hill as an example in the US. But since in this case we're talking about Pakistan, let's just take some event in 2007. I don't know what event, but as an example, right? So if let's say someone in the US invested their money in a Pakistani bank or some other sort of investment thing, right? And if they invested their money in a bank or some investment fund or whatever it is, right? And then there's political unrest in Pakistan, because of which their confidence within the economy falls. So when their confidence in the economy falls, they want to bring their money back to their home country. So this guy wants to bring his money back to the US, right? And so what he's going to do is he's going to take his money out of Pakistan. From Pakistan, money is going to go to the US. And so what this is basically a debit on Pakistan's BOP, right? Because what's happening over here is, since money is going out of Pakistan, it's going to lead to a debit, right? And so money is going out, we end up with a debit on our BOP. Let's say if more money going out, just write it like this: money going out is greater than money coming in. Then in that case, more debit as compared to credit, and so a deficit in the end. Now the fourth reason can be inflation. So let's say if in Pakistan the rate of inflation, let's just represent it as RI, right? So if the rate of inflation is greater, then its trading partners, Pakistan is trading with a lot of countries like the UK, the US, or Germany, whatever. And so if, let's say this is Turkey as an example. So if Pakistan's rate of inflation is greater than, let's say, Turkey or most of its trading partners, what's going to happen is imported goods will become cheaper for us, for the Pakistani population, right? Well, because of the fact that since inflation is high in our country, domestic goods will become expensive, and since the rate of inflation in other countries, which specifically are trading partners, is low as compared to our country, what's going to happen is imported goods will relatively be cheaper now. Imported goods will become relatively cheaper. And so because of this, if the demand for exports is elastic, then obviously our exports will fall since the prices are going up in our country, right? If prices are going up and demand is elastic, then according to P into Q, prices are going up, right? But Q is falling by more than the increase in price. So we end up with a lower export revenue. So that's one part of it, a lower export revenue. And then at the same time, since imported goods have become cheaper, relatively cheaper as compared to our domestically produced goods, and if the demand for imports is also elastic, what's going to happen is the price is going down for us. It's relatively cheaper now, and so the price is going down by a bit, right? But the quantity demanded is going to increase by a lot. We'll end up with a increased import expenditure. So import expenditure is increasing, export revenue is falling, and so if imports greater than exports, more debit as compared to credit, and then a deficit in the end. Now just related to the last point, which is inflation, there is one more point which is directly linked to prices, but the change in prices or the cause of the change in price is different, right? So let's say this is the fifth point, right, which is basically exchange rate. So whenever the value of a currency is overvalued or it appreciates, for example, in this case, initially $1 was equal to 160 Pakistani rupees, right, which means that $1 was able to buy goods worth 160 PKR, right? But then later on, since the currency appreciated, PKR appreciated, there was an increase in its value, and so because of that, now $1 can only buy goods worth 100 Pakistani rupees in the US. So because of this, since now we need more US dollars to buy same amount of goods and services, right? So more dollars required to buy the same amount of goods and services. So what's going to happen is, let's say the demand for exports is elastic. Since in this case, now the people in the US have to pay more, right, to buy the same amount of goods and services. So we can even say that for them, the price has gone up to buy the same amount of goods and services, right? And if the demand, given that the demand is elastic, the quantity demanded will fall by a lot as compared to the increase in price, and so in the end we are left with a lower export revenue. And at the same time, since the Pakistani rupee has appreciated, right, so from 160 rupees it has increased to like 100 rupees. Now let's try to understand this one. So initially Pakistani people had to pay 160 rupees to buy goods worth $1 in the US, right? But now they have to pay less. They only have to pay 100 rupees to buy the same amount of goods and services, right? So it's the opposite of this point for the US, right? So the people in the US now have to pay more US dollars to buy the same amount of goods and services, whereas people in Pakistan have to pay less to buy the same amount of goods and services. So this is the whole dealer of goods plus services. And so because of this, what happens is we can even say that prices are falling for this, like to buy the same amount of goods and services, and the quantity, given that the demand for imports is elastic, this is a very important point. If it is elastic, even in the other case, if it is elastic, then only will the quantity outstrip the change in price. And so in this case, the quantity demanded will increase by more than proportionately as compared to the decrease in price, right? So because of this, what's happening is it's elastic, quantity demanded is increasing by more than the decrease in price, and so we end up with a more or higher import expenditure, and so a higher import expenditure would lead to more debit, more money going out of the country as compared to money coming in the country, which is credit, which is through our exports, which are obviously falling in this case. And so more debit as compared to credit will lead to a BOP deficit.